So in the last few videos we've been taking a look at punctuation. We've looked at the period and the comma. And now take a look at something else. Okay, and this is the semicolon. Semicolon. Some people write it with a hyphen. Personally I don't, and I was taught not to. Okay. Now what is a semicolon? Well, a semicolon is this. That there is a semicolon. Okay, that is a semicolon. Okay. Now I'm going to take a moment and try to show you how to use them. Okay, so semicolons, we generally use them. Okay, I think is a good explanation. Okay, so you can only use semicolons. Can only use semicolons where you could use a period. Where you could use a period. Okay, you can only use semicolons where you can use a period. Which honestly is a little strange, because couldn't you use a period? And the answer is yes. Personally, I find semicolons extremely redundant. When I write, I never use semicolons. And there's no real reason for them in English. Okay? But I'll show you how to use them. Alright, maybe you need to use them, maybe your teacher wants to use them. But you can tell your teacher that I don't have to. There's no real reason to it. And you would be correct in saying that. Alright? So let's take a look at some of these. Alright, so maybe I can say, now they will be long, so I'm sorry if it takes me a while to write these, but I feel like eating pizza. Okay, that's one idea. I feel like eating pizza. Now what I'm going to do is put a semicolon. I feel like eating pizza. Having said that, I don't like pizza very much. Alright, so it is a long sentence. But if we look, it says, I feel like eating pizza. Having said that, I don't like pizza very much. Alright, well if we look, we have the semicolon here. Okay, it's not an I, it is a semicolon. We have two sentences. I feel like eating pizza. Well, that is the first sentence. And the second sentence is, having said that, I don't like pizza very much. Okay, and both those sentences could be separated just fine by a period. I feel like eating pizza. Having said that, I don't like pizza very much. Alright? So hopefully that will help you a little bit more. Okay, but like I said, they're not really necessary. But we use the semicolon to separate two sentences, and they can only be used where you could use a period. Alright, let me get you a different example in a different color here. Maybe I can say, Thomas rides his bike everywhere. Thomas rides his bike everywhere. Semicolon. His helmet is always on his head. Okay? Thomas rides his bike everywhere. His helmet is always on his head. So once again, we have a semicolon here. Thomas rides his bike everywhere. Semicolon. His helmet is always on his head. Okay? So those are two sentences. his helmet is always on his head is a sentence, and Thomas rides his bike everywhere is a sentence. And like I said, they're not necessary for them to be separated by a semicolon, but they are. Okay, they are. Okay, so Thomas rides his bike everywhere. His helmet is always on his head. Okay. And something about a semicolon that I kind of forgot to add is that the sentences must be related. Okay, the sentences must be related. Must be related. For example, instead of saying Thomas rides his bike everywhere, I like to drive my car. Well, those sentences aren't related in any way. But if I did say Thomas rides his bike everywhere, his helmet is on his head, those two things are related, so we put a semicolon there. But like I said previously, you can just as well put a period, and it's exactly the same idea. Okay, let's look at another one. Last one. Let me scroll down a little bit. Okay. So, Mary is very worried for her mother. Mary is very worried for her mother. Semicolon. However, her mother doesn't care. Okay, her mother is not very nice. But to give you an idea, Mary is very worried for her mother. Semicolon. However, her mother doesn't care. So once again, we have two ideas there. Mary is worried for her mother, or sorry, two sentences. However, her mother doesn't care. Okay, so they're separated by a semicolon. And like I said previously, if you wanted to, you could use a period. Okay. So hopefully that'll give you a little bit of an idea about semicolons. If I teach you anything, it's that semicolons aren't really necessary in English. Okay, and personally, if you haven't realized it, I don't like them very much. They make English cumbersome and difficult to try to use a semicolon when you can just as easily use a period. Okay, so I'll leave you there, and if you have any questions about semicolons, I'd be happy to answer. Just please ask in the comments down below. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.